Hello and welcome back to the Armchair QBs. I'm Calum Buchan, alongside me is Dan Cameron, and for the first time since we did our draft preview, and actually the highest rated episode of the Armchair QBs, Dave Orr.
Glad to come back.
You have to save the big stars for later in the year.
Yeah, but at the same time, Calum, I don't think it's very wise to bring 50% of our listeners onto the show. It really does dilute our downloads.
I still download though, you'll be fine.
Yeah, on two devices as well. Let's kick things off with a bit of a news dump, shall we? Dan Campbell was officially hired by the Lions. We thought that would happen last week, but it's good that he got a 6-year contract with knee biting included.
Yeah, immediately being investigated for bounties.
Yeah, he's straight on the watch list. They have made some interesting hires as well on his coaching staff. Like Deuce Staley's come on. That seems to be quite a well-respected one.
Yeah, well, everybody was wanting, at least him to get a head coaching interview with the Eagles, which he kind of got as part of the Rooney Rule, perhaps. Maybe that's being unfair, but he's very, very, very well respected as a motivator and a coach in Philadelphia. And they were always, wanting him to try and ascend there, but it didn't work out. And obviously, with the new staff coming to Philly, he's looking for a job. So that and Anthony Lynn. Being the offensive coordinator, really the only two that I was noticing. But we'll just have to wait and see what kind of the organisation they're building, because obviously what we're going to come on to, talking about Matt Stafford, it's all changed for the Lions.
Yeah, and Dan, the Eagles made their hire. I already said before we started recording, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name, so you can go for it, Dan.
Nick Sirianni.
There we go. I wrote about it. Because I was doing a breakdown of where if Eric Bieniemy was right to feel aggrieved about some jobs, I think this was just a hire of, if you have a brain and two eyes and we're not going to start Carson Wentz, you are instantly ineligible for that Eagles job. So what do you think of the Sirianni hire, Dave?
I mean, it seems to be that they've tied Wentz to the team rather than a coach. So they've obviously limited themselves to people who wanted Wentz. We'll see whether he can actually come in and do anything, but doesn't inspire you with a lot of confidence, I don't think.
Dan, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it does seem as though anybody that came into interview was essentially either told Carson Wentz is going to be the guy, or if they didn't say Carson Wentz was going to be the guy, was immediately kind of kicked out of their East Florida mansion. So it seems as though what's happened here is that they've been trying to get a few candidates, and then Frank Reich has phoned up Jeffrey Lurie. And because everybody now fully accepts that the real brains behind the Super Bowl was Frank Reich, and they can't hire him away from Indianapolis, they said, right, we'll take the next best option, which essentially is his understudy. So he's somebody that we just talked about Deuce Staley and how he was well respected around the league and was associate head coach and all that kind of stuff. Sirianni hasn't even called plays. So this is, very much a kind of lower end hire, perhaps someone that's kind of trying basically organize and fix Carson Wentz in the offense, and then they'll just try and rely on perhaps the coordinators to take care of the defense, and then Howie Roseman will just take care of the team, and that's how they'll work. And there won't be a kind of main personality as a head coach. It's all kind of individualized into Sirianni will take the offense, and Howie Roseman will build the team. So I don't know. I just think it's always looking back at the prettier girlfriend you never really got to marry. So it's pretty transparent what Philadelphia were after. They're after a yes man, and they seem to get it in Frank Reich's understudy.
And so with that filing, only one job remains, the most coveted job in the NFL, the Houston Texans job.
And that's why Brian Daboll decided to stay in Buffalo.
Yeah. And I think they were saying that Leslie Fraser's the favourite now, but God help him. God help him if he actually takes that.
Well, I think the Houston Texans should just go away, and when they figure themselves out, let everybody else know, because it really is painful each week trying to figure out what they're doing.
I did like briefly when it was, and Dave, you must have loved this being a Jags fan in the division, when they just floated out Josh McCown thinking, this will get some positive spin. And no, just instant backlash and condemnation. It was.
It'd just be absolute madness to go from never having coached to being a head coach in the NFL. I don't know if that's ever happened or anything close to that, but it seemed more like one of those, either they're testing for a leak somewhere or they're just trying to get out that publicity for no real reason. It's just odd.
Well, they pulled a Colleen Rooney.
Well, who knows? Like there might come out something, because it's just such a daft interview that. I mean, fair enough, interview him to be a coach on your team to get him in. You know, he's obviously a smart guy. The Eagles liked him to be their stay-at-home quarterback last year, right? So, but yeah, just odd. Can't imagine the ridicule he'd have if he was announced as the head coach.
But it was weird, because you would think, right, all right, let's just try and do some damage control and say, no, we're not actually taking him in for the head coach. Like the head coaching one, it was for a coordinator job or something like that. But they didn't. Their own team Twitter account was like, yeah, we continued discussions with Josh McCown about the head coaching role. So yeah, it's like that Limmy one, don't back down, double down.
Yeah. But that's also what happens when you fire the PR, the communications director for the Texans. All this,
yeah.
It's just Jack Easterby and a bunch of monkeys behind the scenes.
Praying for good luck.
Somebody said that, well, I've been going on Texans Reddit all the time, and it was just like new head coach announced, and I genuinely thought there was one, and it was just a massive picture of Joel Osteen. And I was like, God damn it, they got me. And then it was all Texans fan underneath going, this probably could happen, let's just prepare for it.
I don't get that reference.
Joel Osteen, the super preacher from America.
No.
He's based in Houston. He's a very nice guy. He, when there was the flood in Houston, he locked the church's doors to stop people from coming in and seeking refuge. Just the type of guy that Texans would hire, really. Dave, as our resident Jags fan, the voice of the Jags in the UK, how are you feeling about this Jaguars off-season?
Optimistic with a big question mark, I think. I mean, the big thing is the QB. That I'd be a lot less happy if we didn't have the number one pick, obviously. And I don't think everything else we've managed to do would have been possible without it. Like, we don't get Urban Meyer. You probably don't get Bevel. And I don't even know if you get Joe Cullinan as the DC either. Like, they're all coming because of Lawrence and what he might be, which is exciting.
Are you happy with the Meyer hire, or would you have liked someone else?
I didn't have anyone in mind who I was specifically hoping for. I was a bit dubious at start, as you'd mentioned previously, just because he's had a bit of a scorched earth thing going on. You know, he's not left the last couple of places with good vibes. You know, he's run out on them when things got tough, and he's caused it to get tough. But as a short-termish thing, I don't know who could have got that would have been better. Certainly in building a team and a culture, they've been criticised a lot for sort of being a bit lackadaisical as a team and just kind of laid back, and maybe that's the old Gus Bradley thing still there. I don't know, but I don't think he'll be. The culture should hopefully change, I think, with him there, which is good.
The walking boot will come back. The old Florida walking boot.
You think?
Yeah, that'll be a good, nice fit. I don't know that. Wait, I like how they've tried to create some drama just now of, we don't know who we're going to take number one. Wait, because he came out. I
don't understand that. To me, that's mad. Like, this is like one of the only times you can ever in a draft turn around and say there's legit just one person we're going to take. Like, even with Andrew Luck, we all knew they were going to take Luck, but there was still like a 5% chance they were going to take Griffin. Like, he was still an exciting prospect, and partly you're going, well, if the NFL's changing, like maybe Griffin's the new prototype, but we still didn't really believe it. Whereas now there's no sane person thinks they're going to take Fields.
And also to kind of, perpetually start Mike Glennon during the season to purposefully tank, and then they lucked out with the Jets winning. It just would make no sense now to, take a tackle or Justin Fields or, anybody else. Do you feel as though it was a concerted effort to get the number one pick, to keep them in the running by starting Mike Glennon?
No, because actually I think when Mike Glennon first came in, he was playing better than Gardner. Like, I just think they were terrible. If they were really tanking, they would have left in Luton, because he looked like an absolute deer in the headlights. Like, he had no clue what was going on. He was not ready for it. And they could have justified that in a much better way, saying Glennon's in the future, we don't believe in Gardner, we want to see what Luton can do to do that. So I don't think the real reason they didn't play Gardner for a long time was he had his injury. And Marone talked for a couple of weeks in his pressers about accountability to your teammates, basically implying that Gardner was hurting the team by playing injured, and he didn't like that. So Gardner wasn't even the backup for a couple of weeks when he was healthy. He was inactive.
Is there not a bit of Tropic Thunder about, you don't go full tank and going with Luton would have just been too much tank?
Potentially, but I don't know. If you're in tank mode, you don't want to jeopardise the tank, do you? I mean, you'd rather deal with you can just turn around and say, we would evaluate players. You can always get out of that. I think if you were committed to that tank, you just go for it. I just think that they were terrible.
Yeah, so they didn't take Philly's kind of, just evaluating players in what stance.
No, but they could have, and it would have been more justifiable, I think, because Hurts in theory needs game reps, right? And that's what you're saying. You're hurting your development of a rookie quarterback who you believe will be a valuable piece for you going forward. Sudfeld's not in the plan, is he? But they got away with that. And to be honest, does anybody care about that now? It was 2-3 days of drama and it's gone.
I'll always remember. I don't know why, but I just will. I think it was fucking horrific. Just secondly, obviously, the number one pick is going to be the talking point for the Jags and the building of the franchise going forward. But what's the next area that the Jags need to address on their team?
Defense. The defense. The offense has enough parts. I mean, left tackle is the only spot on the offensive line that's in question because Cam Robinson's a free agent. They'll either re-sign him or I think they'll go hard after someone in free agency. I don't think they're going to wait to 23 or whatever they pick at 25 to address that. So perhaps Trent Williams or something maybe. I don't know. They have enough cap space to go do whatever they want really. But the defense is awful, especially if they're going to move to more of a sort of 3-4 look with Joe Cullen coming from Baltimore. They're going to have to, for example, at corner they had undrafted rookies, 3 of them starting at one point. There's nothing there. And then saying that, they did just obviously draft Henderson last year, but he wasn't great and was hurt in the second half. Realistic
record next year? What would you be happy with? We paid Carolina, who were in total rebuild mode, at 5 wins, and we got it on the money. What would make you happy next year?
500.
That's a big jump.
That is a big jump, but I mean, I don't think that's... Colts did something similar with Luck. He had them as a wildcard team his first year. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think the offense is ready to go if you can drop in a quarterback. An upgrade at tight end for sure would be good, but the skill position guys are good enough. And they had some of the worst quarterback play in the league. So if you go to middle of the pack there, I think you could be 500.
I mean, that division is going to be, there's so many questions about that division. It's not hard to see Jacksonville picking up a couple of wins. I mean, the Texans could be in complete rebuild mode. The Colts, they need to...
Could be.
Well, I mean, it depends what happens with Deshaun. If it goes nuclear or if it doesn't. And then you've got the Colts...
If it.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, if he just holds out or if they're able to bring him back in the fold.
You're in the bargaining stage of denial, Cal.
No, I'm already accepted that he's gone. But I'm just putting out the hypotheticals here. You've got the Colts who need a new QB, and I think that Tennessee are going to come back down to earth without Arthur Smith. We are about to see Ryan Tannehill come back to his Miami days, and I am here for it. And it's going to be so fucking hilarious to watch. So there's big questions all around that division. So I think if you have some level of competence, you could actually. It's not out of the question.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the improvements are attainable at this point. Where they need to get better, they're going to get better. Having brand new coach and 2 new coordinators or 3 new coordinators, it will be an adjustment. So it really depends how well Urban sort of gets the team playing together. But I mean, they're not going to be as bad as last year. That's going to be tough.
Let's segue on. Another bit of news that came out this week was Matt Stafford has requested a trade from Detroit. So in a rare bit of preparation for this show, I asked you all to come up with some destinations for him. So, Dan, I will start with you.
I mean, there's essentially the really, really obvious one, which is Indianapolis, because they've got the cap space, they've got the draft capital, and they require a new starting quarterback. But that feels like cheating, because it's just so obvious. And I think I'm going to throw it out there, and it's going to take some really, really real invention as part of the salary cap. But I think New Orleans can't be counted out of the Matthew Stafford stakes.
I mean, that's like maybe his dream scenario, but are they not over by about $100 million next year?
105 million.
Yeah, they are. But if you bothered reading the link that I sent you, you'll see that actually a lot of that is going to can easily be dealt with by a few restructures and just by letting people go. So they can get down to a reasonable amount. If the cap is as high as 198 million, then they're going to have potentially around about 10 or 15 million spare. Which, if they could perhaps come to a restructure of Stafford's deal, they would be able to do that.
I suppose they have always kind of punted Drew Brees' cap charges down the line. Maybe they'd be willing to do the same. But
yeah, no, I'll maybe even get Cam to tweet the link out on the official Twitter, because it's done by an agent who essentially has gone through the Saints roster and has basically identified who is going and who can be re-signed and who can be restructured, and how they're going to have to do make all the moves necessary to get down to under the cap at all. And once you actually do all that, if it's as high as it potentially now, because I mean there was doomsday scenarios of it being 175, but even with if it's 198, that extra 25 million of space is going to be so important to the Saints. And if they get that extra $20 million of space, then Stafford comes in play if they can get the compensation right.
So the issue with that is, how many draft picks do the Saints have this year?
I don't prepare, fucking Dave. Don't put me on the spot like that.
3.
Yeah, but they've got a first rounder, haven't they?
Yeah, but 28. I mean,
yeah. Well, it's a first rounder. It's a first rounder.
They could trade.
Indeed,
they could trade Taysom Hill. He's worth at least 2 first rounders.
Sandwich.
Yeah, no, but I mean, let's look back at when a quarterback of a similar age was drafted, and that's Carson Palmer, and he went for a first and a second. And I don't even think they were in the same draft. So yes, they totally mortgaged the farm for this final run with Drew Brees, but now you're at the position where you've got a lot of rookie. They had that magic draft in 2019. And they essentially now are set up a lot of good positions with a lot of young players on manageable contracts. So if you're going to, have no draft picks this year, why not just forgo the draft completely? To have a look around free agency, get Stafford in, and then you can start the year after.
It's an interesting one.
I just don't see it. I think the Lions will have a better opportunity to trade him than that 28th pick, because what are they going to do at quarterback once they do that? And if the Saints were to give up, say, even though they've got a 1, 2, and a 4, even with some future compensation, they have no money after paying Stafford to do anything on their team.
All right, Dave, let's just send him to the Colts. Sorry for trying to be provocative.
So I think the Colts are in the same situation, though. I mean, they fair enough, they've got 21 instead of 28, but they've got no extra picks. They just have their 7. And I don't see that the Lions are going to be happy enough to take that.
Oh,
I don't know, though.
You got to remember that the market will dictate what they're bloody being given. And these other, as much as we don't say that there is collusion in the NFL, no one's going to overpay for Matthew Stafford, especially when the Lions are saying, yeah, fine.
Well, I don't know about that. Look, what did Bradford went for a first in a preseason? People overpay for quarterbacks, and Stafford is a level above people like Bradford who went for a first.
So, yeah, but a singular first, that's what I'm saying. Right, I think before we even go anywhere, we have to figure out what this compensation is, because if Deshaun Watson is going to be a minimum of 3, there's no way anyone's parting with multiple firsts for Stafford. It might be 1 and 2 2s, but I don't think it's anything more than that.
I think it's a 1 and a 2 at most.
Here's the thing, though. Not all first-round picks are the same. That's the thing. Like, 28 is not worth the same. Like, 28 in the next year's first is not the same as, say, the Broncos have got the 9th pick. That 9th pick is more valuable than 28 and next year's first as a late pick. So those early first rounders are way more valuable. So I think if he is being traded, he's going to a team with a top 10 pick. because the Lions don't care where he goes. They don't, as long as he's out of the division, I think they don't really care that he lands in a good spot. They just want the most value.
Yeah, but again, teams with, I don't think. I mean, I'll tell you what, Calum, you're often good at this and doing it in a relatively quick time. What was the number that the Raiders gave up for Carson Palmer? Because sorry, what's that?
17, and then a second the next year.
Right. So that's probably about the right value that you'd be looking for Stafford now. I don't think there's any way that any team parts with a top 10 draft pick for Matthew Stafford.
Another way to look at it is because of how many years he's put into this team, right? And he didn't go to Dan Campbell to ask for this trade. He's got a good relationship with the owner. He went and talked to her directly to get this trade. I think what you're looking at compensation-wise might be closer to the Favre to the Jets trade, where they're just happy to get the money off the books and maybe pick up a third.
Wow, I disagree.
And but they put a caveat on him and say, we're not going to trade you in the division, but where do you want to go? And we can make this work for you.
I think Dan's right when he said the market sets the price. But, the first question that I have is, how do the Jets feel about Fields and the other QBs? Because if they don't like those guys, Stafford might be an option. Whether they're interested in 2 or not, they probably have to give up the number 2 pick if it was going to the Jets. But that's something I can see happening. If they're not enamored with those QBs in the draft, and then that, whether they're interested or not, the threat of them being interested means teams like the Broncos and things like that with earlier first round picks come into play.
Yeah, I just think that if you're looking at Denver, I take it your spot is Denver, Dave. We didn't really get that. We were too busy kind of shouting about the Saints and their creative accounting, mismanagement, whatever it was, to actually get your position. But are you saying that Denver is your spot?
No, Denver's an example. I don't necessarily think it will be Denver, but the obvious one is the Jets to me, because I know the Colts is the perfect situation for him to land in. But I don't see that they're going to be able to match the compensation that other teams are willing to pay. So if the Jets are in, all of a sudden the compensation goes way up. But
I don't think he would want that, though.
It doesn't matter what he wants.
No, this is it. I think this is a trade where they'll make it work for him.
I think they're letting him go, and that's enough for them. You've got a new coaching staff in. They're not going to be happy if you give away a prized asset. He's 32 years old. He should still be able to play for 5 or 6 years at a high level. I'd be, for example, the Jets. What if they gave a swap of picks, so they still had the 7th pick, and then they could from the Detroit Lions, and then all of a sudden you give up your 2 and your pick in the 20s. The Jets get Matthew Stafford and another top 10 player.
But Darnold has to go in the opposite direction.
Potentially, but the Jets why wouldn't the Jets do that?
It's just last week we were discussing Deshaun Watson, and Calum often was basically flip-flopping a quarterback in as a replacement. I didn't think that was necessarily what would happen.
But again, if Detroit go up to 2, they have their pick of the second QB, basically. So it really depends how do Detroit view those QBs and how do the Jets view them. Yeah. If the Jets are enamored with one, they're just going to stay put, because you don't move if you think the quarterback's going to be the guy. But I think the market's going to be higher than you two think it is. I might be proven wrong, but I'll take the over.
Right. So you think that you think it's basically any team in the top 10 is essentially the kind of the front runner for getting Matthew Stafford.
Maybe down to top 12, because that's got the Niners are at 12. So I think it has to be something high, because if one of those teams is interested, they're going to be able to pay more than a team like the Saints or the Colts or even the Steelers has been talked about if Ben goes.
Food for thought. I just Carolina's kicking about there with a kind of placeholder quarterback. They've paid him too much money, and they're still kind of building from the bottom up. I think going out and getting Matthew Stafford is not what they want from culture-wise, but I can understand why Denver would want him. They've got a young core of good offensive players, and they basically only need a quarterback. But I just think they're not going to be willing to part with the number 9 pick. And then again to the Jets, that's just too high for me, I'm afraid. I think Calum's kind of right as well. I think they're going to facilitate this. It's not basically we're trading you without your permission, but at the same time, he is going to be out of there. So if they only get, if the Lions get a trade offer that's just too good to refuse, then Stafford is one that asked for this trade. So you might just have to lump it.
I think 49ers.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, they'd be instantly a better team.
It's got to be a team that's going to win now. Like, because the Jets have been linked with Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson isn't like a win now move. He's still only 24. So you've still got, like, I don't know, at least another 10 years with him. Whereas if you're getting in Stafford, what you're saying is we want to win within the next couple of years, and we're only a quarterback away from winning. So for me, that rules out the Jets and it puts it straight into a 49ers bucket. Patriots were linked, but then they signed Matt Patricia, which I don't think that would happen. And I genuinely think he just would say, I'm not going to report if you make that deal. The Rams were mooted as well, but I don't know how realistic that is.
I think they're fairly trapped into that contract with Goff, are they not? For at least another year.
I mean,
and again, the Rams don't have a first-round pick either, so that kind of negates them out of that equation.
I think what we'll also got to kind of consider, because I mean, Stafford is just really, a tiny part in the whole quarterback carousel is going to happen in the NFL this year. I mean, half the league could have different quarterbacks from their starting quarterbacks this year. And it really just depends which front office is the most aggressive and goes out and gets their guy first, because until that first transaction happens, it's everybody's going to be waiting for the next domino to fall. So I just don't know who makes the first move. I mean, San Francisco have got the history of making aggressive trades and going out and getting who they want. They've got form for trading kind of high draft picks as well for who they want. So it could be them, but it's really, really difficult right now because there are so many quarterbacks for so many spots and teams could go in so many different directions. It really is going to matter as to which team just is aggressive and goes out and says, right, this is what we want, we've identified, and we're pulling the trigger. And it could be as early as mid-March.
What makes Stafford interesting there is, though, that he's the one that's confirmed that's moving. So I think he will be the first one to fall, because it's certainly going to happen before the draft, because the Lions are going to want that draft capital to use. But he'll be the first one to go, I think, with the first big piece anyway.
And that kind of sets the price for Watson as well.
I think it's two separate ones. I think what you said is correct. Watson's 25, Stafford's 32. I think they're different types of moves, and they're kind of different. I don't think anything with Stafford, unless it's a knock-on effect of teams then having to get rid of quarterbacks and certain spots becoming available that we didn't expect, then I don't think that it's they're linked in any way.
It's interesting as well, though, that the Texans don't have to trade Watson, even if he asks for it. So you're going to have to blow them away with an offer, or Houston has to have a viable path to replacement. Because if they got rid of Watson and had to play a year with journeyman type quarterback, that would just be a terrible start for the new regime. Whereas obviously the Lions, there's no floor to the Lions trade. They're going to sell off Stafford to the highest bidder, even if it's not quite what they hope.
But then, their coaching staff has security. Campbell's in for 6 years, so he knows there's no pressure. You don't have to win now.
And they knew that Stafford was going when they took the job. That was mentioned to all the guys in the interviews.
So I guess maybe, I don't know, I'm talking myself around in circles here, but maybe that leads more credence to the fact that they might not be holding out for a massive monster offer from Matt Stafford.
No, I think they'll want the draft picks in before the draft.
Yeah, they'll do.
They don't want 2022 picks. They want them this year, and then they're going to have a sort of Carolina type situation where they have to new culture, new players, just from the ground up, and they've been told they've got time to do that. They're not trying to duct tape a quick win this year. They're building it for the long haul. Yeah,
no, I think that makes sense. Anything else you want to touch on, guys?
No.
Let's the games from the weekend then, shall we? We'll start with Green Bay and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay win 31-26. I don't think there's much that happened in this game coaching-wise that we can talk about, but we'll give it a go. Tom Brady.
Oh, sorry. We have to make sure that you're joking at that point. Because deadpan delivery doesn't really kind of fly on a podcast.
Yeah, but as long as you've both picked up on it, so it's fine. Yeah, of course, there was a lot of trouble. There was a lot of bad coaching going on in this game. I do think it's important just to touch on, Tom Brady, 10th Super Bowl. He didn't play great in this game. He had 3 interceptions. 2 of them I put on him. 1 I put on, I would say 50-50 between him and Evans. But it is just incredible. It's death taxes and Tom Brady in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, he's West Mantooth. He's my Ron Burgundy to my West Mantooth. I hate him, but goddamn it, I respect him.
Yeah, you feel. I didn't think they were going to win, but you feel stupid afterwards, going, actually, why did I think Tom Brady wouldn't get to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it was such a weird one because it was like that first drive, it was just how clinical they were on third down. It was like Green Bay weren't aware that you did have to stop them on third down to force a punt. It was, I can't even remember let me just look up what the final stats were for third down conversions, because Tampa Bay, you could say that was their one strength from this game, and one of the reasons why they were able to kill Green Bay, other than the coaching.
They were 9 of 14, but I'm pretty sure they converted the first 7 passes third downs.
So it was a ruthlessly efficient start to the game, and then I think from there we all had the sense of impending doom about what was to come.
Yeah, well, I mean, after the first drive, I messaged you and said, "Oh God, that was a little bit too easy," and just it really kind of made me worry that this was going to be the exact same as Week 6. And through the first quarter, it was exactly like Week 6. But then the rest of the game happened, and Tampa Bay were able to basically jump on a multitude of coaching errors from Green Bay. I mean, where do you want to start? I'll start from highlighting it last week. Green Bay, the last 2 weeks in the red zone, within 10 yards to go, have just been an absolute calamity. We said before the NFC Championship game that they got down to the red zone, they threw 3 times within the 10-yard lines, and yes, you've got Aaron Rodgers, but you're also one of the better rushing teams in the league, better rushing teams in the playoffs. And it was 3 straight passes, and you ended up having to settle for a field goal. And it was the exact same in the first drive, in the second drive. In this game, they got down within the 10. They've been running the ball well. You've drafted that big AJ Dillon to basically be your thumper, your Derrick Henry, and you don't use him inside the 10. I mean, it's some really, really questionable play calling offensively inside the red zone for the Packers in the first half. And I'll let Dave deal with what happened on the on the last second touchdown for Tampa Bay to Scotty Miller.
Yeah, that was strange, because you've the only thing that Tampa can possibly be doing there is trying to throw a 5-yard out to get another 5 yards closer to kick a field goal, or throwing a bomb. But Green Bay just kind of lined up, and it was more of just a base look. You often just see the corners and safeties hugging the sidelines saying, "You can catch it in bounds, but we're going to tackle you and we're going to get the halftime." Really strange call, and just an absolute mind meld from a coordinator in the call, or maybe the corner didn't do what he was told to do, but it certainly seemed to be a strange call, because Miller can fly, and he made them pay. It was crazy. And on the Dillon thing as well, it was, especially with Aaron Jones out of the game, I was surprised not to see more of Dillon then.
Yeah. I mean, Calum, you preach a lot about the middle 8. Well, let's just talk about the middle 4 here, because obviously with less than 2 minutes, Green Bay have got the ball. It's 14-10, and they're going to potentially be driving to either go ahead or.
It was 14-10 with so the Packers go get their field goal and make it 14-10 with 4:59 remaining. So you then go down to the Tampa Bay, get the ball with, let's just say, just over 4 minutes. So they're in control of the first 4 minutes of the middle 8.
Honestly, I don't want to talk about it. I'm so focused on the middle four, Callum. Let's not
Okay.
let's not even go to the middle eight, because it literally was 2 minutes before halftime and 2 minutes after time that this game really swung.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Because we had, with 1:42 left, the Packers taking the ball and they throw an interception. Okay, fair enough. But there's 34 seconds left, and thereafter the Bucks run 5 plays, 4 to get a first down. And throughout every single one of those 4 plays before the first down, with 8 seconds left, they're in a two-man. They're in a two-deep look. They're playing quarters a lot of the time, and they're allowing the underneath stuff. And so it really, really is strange when in those first 4 plays they play with 2 deep safeties protecting the cornerbacks, and then with that 1st and 10, with seconds left, they go into a single high look and they allow Scotty Miller to run past them. And there's been some commentators saying that essentially it's because he was a white guy that he wasn't getting enough respect for running deep. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But Mike Pettin has got to take responsibility for that. He's already been thrown under the bus by LaFleur, saying it was the wrong call. And, Greg Williams got fired for such an egregious one, which lost them the game. But this touchdown here extends a lead going into halftime, and it is just inexcusable how you let that happen. I mean,
it's more the fact that, as well, King's playing inside technique on that, and when you watch them running it, King isn't even looking at Miller. So they're playing, from what I can see, they're essentially, because they've got one high, and he's just doing a bail technique, but it's like he's playing cover 3, but he's not bothered to recognise that his number one threat is streaking down the sidelines behind him.
Yeah.
But to be fair, King had an absolute shiter of a game, which was another issue in this.
Yeah, I don't know if he essentially was kind of peeking inside too much to the number 2 receiver, expecting him to break out and he was going to jump on it or what. But Brady just went drop back. He only had one look, and King was targeted a lot in the first half, and perhaps rightly so, because Miller just absolutely blazed by him, and it's just inexcusable that in a professional setting in the championship game, for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, that you make that call on with seconds to go. So what if they get 10 yards? The clock's going to run out. Or it's going to be extremely difficult to do anything, or they're going to kick a field goal. You surely have to protect from getting 7 there and allow 3. Lead on from the end of the half, and then take away 3 plays later into the first drive for Green Bay in the second half, and 1 play later they got a touchdown. That's 14 points in the over those 4 minutes before the half, and 2 minutes before the half and 2 minutes after the half, and that's 14 points that Green Bay just they couldn't recover from that.
Yeah, it was too big a hole. It was. Green Bay were really struggling as well with their protections on Rodgers the whole game. Like that front from Tampa were doing an excellent job, and you could tell that they really missed Bakhtiari.
Yeah, Billy Turnstile. I'm not sure if he was a kind of a flunky of the Bengals, but he certainly didn't ingratiate himself to anybody from offensive line Twitter, because Jason Pierre-Paul just had his absolute way with him.
I think the other issue as well with the Cameron Brate touchdown is how open Cameron Brate got as well on that touchdown. I just wanted to, because I remember looking at it, it was like, why are you not covering the tight end? They sold out on that run for no reason.
It's the perfect time to try and throw there, right? I mean, you bring in the extra lineman, you bring it all down, but the best time to go for the sort of big play is after a turnover. It's the most cliched coaching thing you can do as an offense, but it works because it's just an absolute dagger when it does work.
Yeah. And but as soon as that happened, it just completely killed the game. It was just, I thought it was poor discipline from the corners, to be honest. I thought they were an absolute. I thought the coaching plan with the corners specifically was pretty weird. Like, you've got one of the best cover corners in the NFL, and Alexander, and why? There were times when he wasn't on Evans or he wasn't on Miller, and it just made no sense where they were placing him.
They just leave him in the same spot, though, don't they?
Yeah, but he has travelled before. In other games, they have matched him up. I don't understand why they didn't do it this time. It just really confused me.
I think one thing about Bruce Arians' offense is that the tight ends do get neglected. Said it before, say it again. Before, I think Gronk has got the highest reception total of a tight end in Bruce Arians' offense since he became, an offensive coordinator in the league. Or since Heath Miller. So they just doesn't really focus on the tight ends a lot in the game plan whatsoever. So maybe that crept into how the coverage was treating tight ends generally for Tampa Bay in this game. I don't know, but certainly it is exactly what Dave says. First off, you get that turnover play, you're inside the red zone already. Just take a wee play action shot on first down, momentum swinger, and it turned round. But Dave, you got anything to say about basically how Tom Brady has almost allowed Green Bay to get back into it, but they didn't do anything with it?
Yeah, I mean, after that spell at the start of the half, Green Bay sort of got a bit of momentum. They got a couple of touchdowns in there, and I personally thought that they were going to come back and do it. So they get their second and third interceptions in the end of the third and start of the fourth. But all they can do after that is 3 and out both times with all pass plays. They're only down 5 points. There's a whole quarter to go, and they abandoned the run. And it's it was a bit desperate almost as an offense. It didn't really, they lost yards on one drive and they no yards on the other. So as much as the defense wasn't playing great, they were at least getting the ball back and they were giving the offense a chance. And really, it was the offense that didn't manage to win the game for Green Bay in the end.
Yeah, I think, we're going to come on to the final coaching decision, which everybody on kind of analytics Twitter is absolutely screaming about, and that's obviously the decision to kick the field goal and not go for the touchdown, the 2 points. But as it was happening, they have 4 minutes and 30 seconds when they get the ball for that final drive before they kick the field goal, and they run 2 plays and they allow 1 minute and 10 seconds to run off the clock. And I messaged you and I said, there's just no urgency here. And it was really, really strange that they played with no urgency, got themselves down to just about 10 seconds above the 2 minute warning, and they then chose to go for the field goal. Surely, if you're being that relaxed, supposedly trying to be that methodical and make sure you're getting into the right plays, that you then have to go for it because you've taken so much time off the clock.
It's almost like they were down by 6 and they were like, we've got 1 possession to win the game and we will win it with this possession. Whereas if you're down 2 scores, that's when you want to go fast because you still need to get a stop and get the ball back or give yourself 2 opportunities.
I kind of understand. I don't agree with what he did, but I can get behind some of the thinking. The issue was that they called 3 passes once they got into the red zone, and all 3 were incomplete. Now, you could argue on third down when Rodgers was scrambling. If Rodgers had actually run forward and maybe got to within the 3, or just gained any type of yards on that, then I think he probably would have gone for it. But the fact that it was just 3 unsuccessful plays in quick succession, I think he was just like, look, let's just get the points, regroup, adjust, the defense will get a stop, and then we can go down and get a quick score with some urgency. But it just never panned out like that.
But we've been in a situation before. We're not going to talk about whether Rodgers could run it in for a touchdown or not on third down. He didn't attempt it. It looks as though he could have done it, but anyway, that's by the by because we're talking about the strategy here. But again, you're down inside the 10, just around about the 10, and you're never going to get better field position than that at all. Why not go for it and then have the ball there? You're still going to have the 2 minutes clock off, and you're still going to have the opportunity to go for the touchdown, the 2 point. You go for the touchdown now to know what you have to get, and so that allows you to have the freedom to do that. I think it's for them to allow so much time to go off the clock and then accept a field goal and then think, right, we'll stop Brady. I think it was again, underestimating Brady to a certain extent and just being not a coward, but playing safe and knowing that you probably couldn't be criticised for it because it's what the textbooks would say. But I just think that the dynamic of the game was different. I think you got down there, you go for it.
You could, but you can also say, right, so you've had 3 incomplete passes on that drive. you can argue with that play selection once they got to the 8-yard line. I think that's fair. I think on those 3 downs, you could say, like, why didn't you at least run it at least once with Dillon? That's a fair criticism. You also have to think back about how Tampa were performing, and Brady specifically, prior to this Green Bay drive. Yeah, they had come away with a field goal the drive prior, but Brady was in a bit of a slump. He'd thrown back-to-back interceptions on the 2 possessions prior to that. So I can understand why LaFleur had some confidence in his defense and maybe thought, we've got Tampa Bay on the ropes here. Let's just take the safe points.
To me, I think if you've got their number on, if you think your defense is able to get that stop, you just pin them back. That's a reason to go for it rather than to take the points, I think, because that field position, if you can force them to punt from inside the 10, all of a sudden you're then only, at midfield at worst by the time because the punts out the end zone, they're always a bit rushed because of the pressure. To me, that says, actually, we don't trust Brady right now, so we're just going to go for it.
No, I agree. I can't argue with that. But then part of me is also like, if you failed 3 times on something, though, like, do you have confidence in your own offense? I
think if you know you're going from when you get to the 8-yard line, as the play caller, you should know whether you've got 4 downs to use or not. And if you've got 4 downs to use from the 8-yard line, one of them has to be a run, because just you've got to assume the defense is expecting a pass because of the situation in the clock. If you can get a run for even 4 or 5 yards, all of a sudden it's a much easier proposition to score when you've only got 3 or 4 yards to go. And I get that when you get to 4th and goal at the 8, that becomes a lot less easy to go for. But if you're play calling, if you know you've got 4 downs, you treat it differently.
So from those 8 plays, they ran the ball once, like from the start of that possession. And that was A.J. Dillon who ran it for 9 yards.
On the first play.
And then they never realised that they had a running back the rest of that game, the rest of that drive. And it was, I get it, you want to put it on Aaron Rodgers because, you've got one of the best quarterbacks. But there's some real issues, I think, with the play calling on both sides.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, it's a bad day to have your worst game. I think things are perhaps highlighted because it's and emphasised because it's the NFC Championship game. But we saw it the game previously with questionable red zone play calling and lack of execution, and it popped up again in the NFC Championship game at the worst possible time. And then the defense didn't fulfill their obligation to kind of keep them in it. We said in the preview that Green Bay's defense would keep them in it, not cause it to be too much, and they just utterly fell apart and allowed minimum of 2 easy scores. And that's just the difference. You can't have those type of drop off games against Tom Brady, even when he throws 3 picks, and he still manages to pull out and win. It's just one of those ones where everything aligns for Tampa and nothing aligns for Green Bay.
Yeah, but it's happened like 2 years in a row now for Green Bay. So it's starting to feel like they have to get over that hump.
Yeah. Quick question about Aaron Rodgers' future in Green Bay. This whole, lots of people's futures are uncertain, even mine. Is it just a ploy for a new contract?
Either that or he's just pissed off. I mean, you're allowed to be pissed off when you don't get to the Super Bowl.
Aaron Rodgers is a calculating automaton. He knows exactly what he's doing every single point that he does it.
Well, he certainly knows how this is coming off, but also, are you in your best frame of mind when you've just lost that game? And you're allowed to be pissed at your coach there. You shouldn't show it out in public necessarily, but you're allowed to not be happy with that situation. But he's not going anywhere. I mean, Love wasn't even the backup QB. He's inactive this year, so they don't think he's ready to play. So
we know he's fuming about the decision about the field goal. He said that in the post game, said it wasn't his decision. But,
I just think he's one of those ones where I think it is maybe he wants a new contract just so he knows that they're committed to him for longer than next year.
Yeah, I think it's a really calculated move by him to ensure that he's not going to be replaced halfway through the season next year if for whatever reason there's a slump. I think he's trying to solidify that he's going to get another 2-3 years minimum of with Devontae Adams, because it's obvious that they can work well together and the offense can move. But at the same time, he's obviously wanting a bit more of a commitment to him, the person, rather than perhaps maybe bringing in other players.
I mean, the other thing as well is this could be a completely different game if Bakhtiari's healthy and they can actually deal with that pressure. So it's not like Green Bay need to surround him with a load more weapons.
No, but again, it goes back to the coaching. You know that you've got a difficulty with your left tackle. You're playing, you're playing a poor man's left tackle against a good pass rush. Why isn't there more help? Why isn't there more chipping, more play action, more actual proper boots? I mean, every so often it was just a case of they would run a boot just to make sure that it was still there as a constraint. But putting Rodgers on the move isn't a terrible idea. It's not what you want to do, but at the same time, when you're having such a problem with your left tackle, you're not giving him any sort of help. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was sacked 25 times this year, and 10 times was by the Tampa Bay defense.
Well, on that happy note, let us move on to a game that Dan, I'm sure, is going to revel in. Buffalo 24, Kansas City 38. The Chiefs go marching on. Buffalo's dreams are dead, and Dan is dancing on their grave.
Delighted. I'm jumping off a table to dance on their grave. Didn't deserve to be in the game, and it not that it necessarily showed up, but I'm just glad that Kansas City of 2019 showed up to kind of put them in their place, and that's really all I have to say about that.
Not bitter at all about Buffalo knocking out the Bills, and your pre-season pick of the Colts.
Well, as I say, they didn't deserve to be there, and nobody can tell me that they did.
Dave, your thoughts, your measured response on this game.
I was happy that the Chiefs came through and won. I think I think it would have been a bit of a letdown to watch the Bills Bucks Super Bowl. It would have been a bit meh. But this is what we want to see, right? We want to see the Chiefs. We want to see the Bucks. This is what I was after. And to be honest, I know they got the touchdown late to keep it a bit closer, but it wasn't even that close, I don't think, at the end.
No,
I think the Chiefs thoroughly deserved it.
Yeah, it wasn't really a close game at all. I thought we were maybe in for something when the Bills went up 9-0 in the first quarter.
You should know better being a Houston Texans fan.
I know, I should know better, but I thought, we're in for a game, and there's Wesley Frazier's a good DC. Maybe he'll try for something. Patrick Mahomes, I thought, would be hobbled with this turf toe, but it turns out he is actually Wolverine and just regenerates midweek. Definitely didn't have a concussion, so he should have played. Definitely, but it was just scary how easily they put up those 21 points in the second quarter.
I mean, I think they scored on 3 or 4 possessions or something in the first half, and the Buffalo had 2 more possessions than them effectively, and they were still down by 9 at halftime. So although it was only a 9-point game, it felt like it was done. Like it felt like the Chiefs, if they wanted to, could just score whenever.
Yeah, it was just. I mean, Buffalo really didn't want to cover Travis Kelce at all. That seemed to be their plan, just let him have the ball. And
I think they chose the poison.
Yeah, it was like don't get beat by Tyreek Hill, but
they failed at that.
Yeah. I saw that they had White on Kelce when Kelce was outside, and he did quite a good job on him. But I think the Chiefs just moved Kelce back inside. I think if they get a linebacker or a safety out on him, they'll just leave him out singled up on the boundary. But whenever they're getting a top corner, they just go, okay, that's fine. We'll just bump him back inside. We'll shift him in. And they just, he went off from the slot.
I don't know if there's not really much of a weakness to this Chiefs team. I think that's the issue. It's like, how do you stop them? Well, now I think what could make it interesting is there's no Fisher. It looks like that's his Achilles done. And Mitchell Schwartz. Yeah, Mitchell Schwartz is doubtful now with a back injury. So against this Tampa front, it could get interesting. But
2 weeks to prepare. I'm willing to put my money on. Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce.
Yeah,
I appreciate that's what it is, but they've got 2 weeks to prepare, and the lack of attention that the Packers put to their left tackle situation, I don't think is something that will happen to the Chiefs.
Well, no, they will game plan, but there will still be at least a couple of downs where you can't help, and that there will be something. It's just a case of how badly that goes to the Chiefs. Then I think because Fisher's not great out there at left tackle, but he's certainly better than whoever it is they had coming in.
The other issue is that the Tampa Bay secondary's banged up as well. So, it kind of, I don't know. I would still put Tampa Bay's defense in the disadvantage there.
Yeah. Well, we're stealing from next week, I think.
Yes. Yes, we are. So the Bills' performance, it was quite interesting. Romo seemed to be getting frustrated with Allen as well, because Allen was, just taking the bait and going for the deep shot when really the Chiefs were leaving the underneath wide open for him and just daring him to, matriculate it down the field. But he kind of reverted back to his old ways a little bit, Josh, during this game.
And that includes taking terrible, terrible sacks. I think of two straight away that makes me think, right, that's the type of game that Josh Allen's going to have. It's not going to work out well for them. Too many times they were getting into kind of 3rd and 23, 3rd and 18. It wasn't, from sacks. So whenever people forget that this Kansas City Chiefs Spagnuolo defense has a lot of talent on it, and they do well. It just gets overshadowed by the fact that Mahomes always pulls it out, but the defense keeps them in games, and when they're able to get turnovers like they did, it's very, very difficult to say that the Kansas City Chiefs defense isn't on a level par with their offense just now.
Yeah, I think Spags did a really good job. Romo was really good during the broadcast, highlighting everything that they were doing and just how they were hiding that cover two that they were kind of predominantly playing in. I think that did highlight how far Josh Allen's got to come as a quarterback. I think it's now also a lot about the mental side that he really needs to improve on and his understanding of the game, because he never saw anything like this in college.
No, but at the same time, I think, previous years he's had a running game to fall back on. This year he's not had it at all, and they became very one-dimensional towards the latter part of the season, which again it's very, very difficult to progress in the playoffs when you don't at least have some semblance of a rushing game. But when you're relying on your quarterback to run for 88 yards and basically outrush 3 other players by more than triple what they got on the ground, it's just not really sustainable, and most of those were on undesigned scrambles. So just having no ground game meant that they couldn't have really any legitimate play action, and they were relying all on Allen to make decisions, which again he has been better, but like you say, he wasn't taking what was available to him, and perhaps just thinking we need a shot, we need touchdowns, not field goals, we need to get first downs, and maybe not desperate, but just a little bit of youthful exuberance maybe getting to him.
And Dave, former Jags player TJ Yeldon was involved.
Yeah, one of many Jags that were playing well this weekend, not for Jacksonville, which is phenomenal. I just wanted to go back to the Chiefs defense a little bit. Obviously, they played really well, but I think it's more about the team that they're on rather than them necessarily being a great defense. I don't know if they're in Cincinnati that they're a good defense. I think it's more to do with they know they can go out there and take chances and try and create turnovers and send some more pressure and things, which obviously worked a lot in this game because it really did fool Allen. But I think they do that more as a compliment to the offense rather than necessarily being full of high quality players.
I think that's actually a very fair point. That's not really one that I'd considered, but I guess, when you're playing on a defense and you know that your offense can march down at a clip, you're not as worried. So I think that's a very fair point. On the plus side for Buffalo, it looks like they're going to get to keep Dayball, which is good for Josh Allen's development. The history of, the losing team coming back to the conference championship is not great. What do we see for the Bills next year?
It is if you're the Bills in the early 90s. They got back 4 times in a row.
No, but that was to the Super Bowl.
Well, how did you get to the Super Bowl, Cal?
The conference championship. Yes, but I'm saying the losing in your AFC conference championship.
Okay, all right, fair enough. They just have to get the run game sorted. They have to find a way to kind of mesh this new emergent Josh Allen with the run game that they had that got them to the playoffs in 2019, and fix their defense, because their defense was nowhere near the level that it was in 2019 either. So they've seen a progression from Josh Allen. The Stephon Diggs is one of the best trades that's happened in the NFL probably for the last 10 years, and they've got some pieces that are there. Cole Beasley, John Brown, they all have a role to play. But again, everyone kind of fell away a little bit apart from Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs in the playoffs. So, they drafted Zach Moss in the second round last year. He seems okay, but I think they'll probably, they've got some offensive line free agents that they'll have to replace, and then they'll just have to go after some playmakers on defense, because, we talk about, I think Dave's talking about how nobody on the Kansas City defense maybe could be a true star or whatever, or maybe the collection of players and the way that they play defense is only because of the way the offense plays. Well, I think for the way that Buffalo wants to play on offense, they're going to have to get some true star talent on defense, and not just have very good players. Tre'Davious White, very good player. Edmonds, very good player, but I think they still lack a lot of pass rush, and I think that's where they need to focus their efforts on defense next year.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to pull up their cap situation for next year. Are they in cap heaven or cap hell?
I think the middle of the road from memory.
Yeah, they've got $2 million spare. So, with only 41 players signed. So they still need to do some work. I don't know how they'll get their free agents in. Maybe it becomes more of a destination, but I think that's something that they have to look at. But certainly the run game is something that needs addressed.
Yeah, they just abandoned it in the playoffs, and it wasn't. And also, I understand that point why, because Singletary wasn't really getting it done. But they need to fix that for sure.
Anything else that we want to touch on with this game?
No, just delighted.
Of course you are.
Me too. I've got a future on the Chiefs, so I was happy with that.
Bastards, all of you. I had my £10 on the Bills.
Fucking curse is alive and well.
To be fair, I did also have the full conference lineup, so I did all right on that one.
Yeah, that's because you picked every team on a doubles.
Yeah. But,
game to system.
Far out in advance, they still had to get there.
Yeah.
It's not, I did less of the shaming. That was, it was smart by me. We'll do a full Super Bowl preview next week, but I was just going to very quickly give out the line for it, and it is Chiefs -3. But the big news is the best bet in all of Super Bowl history. First score to be a safety, 56-1. Get on that. Put your £2 down. It has happened before.
Yeah, my mate still hasn't forgiven me for telling him it was a stupid thing to do in the Seattle Broncos and the Seahawks Broncos game. I got some very, very angry text messages.
£2 on pays £112.
Speculate to accumulate.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, we will see you next week. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can watch the shows on YouTube. Like and subscribe, and goodbye.